How's it going, guys?
Howdy. I want to touch upon a topic that I see crop up quite a bit, and I'm sure you've seen it too, that feminism is a divide and conquer strategy intended to pit women against men and vice versa. Now, that's certainly not a false statement, but it is a woefully oversimplified statement, and it's important to elaborate on this a bit. Feminism is a lot more than a divide and conquer strategy, and I'm going to tell you guys what it is. The feminist activism that we see today is tied into the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as part of Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality. At least that's what they call it, but it has nothing to do with achieving equality. I've previously covered this on my channel in my video titled Women and the New World Order, and I'll be covering it again in the future. While I'm talking to you guys, I'm going to show you guys some cover pages of documents I've collected over the past 8 years to sort of give you a visual demonstration of what the UN have in mind in regards to SDG number 5. These documents come from various multilateral organizations, including the UN themselves, NGOs, corporations, and others working underneath the UN to promote the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not going to show more than the title pages in this videos because I don't want to mess around and get a copyright strike. But you can find every single one of these for free on any search engine, including Google. Just type the name of the document plus PDF in the search bar and it should pull it right up. I urge you guys to look through some of these. Feminism has many different facets to it, and it's ultimately a product of the mystery schools, which is something we're going to cover on this channel in due time. From a political standpoint, feminism is a strategy to dissolve the family unit in order to take away the right of the parents to govern and discipline their own children. It's also a way to tax both men and women. It's also a way to confuse the identity of men and women themselves. And this is a complex topic that I don't really have time to dive into in this video. But the central political goals of feminism are not centered around conquering through division. The central goals of feminism are to demonize, pathologize, emasculate, and ultimately disempower men, erasing their identity in the process, while artificially propping women up in every sector of society, even including the church, to create a female-led society where women are the primary breadwinners and the primary decision makers all the way across the board. It's also a strategy to prop women up into a position to where they can dismantle the norms, customs, and traditions that define Western society so that new norms and new customs can be established. When the UN refers to women as agents of transformative change in their literature, this is what they're talking about. I'm going to give you guys an obscure piece of ancient history. There was an ancient fraternal order in Afghanistan, a branch of the mystery schools, known as the Roshaniya. This fraternity, like many other ancient fraternities, faced serious opposition from the religious elite in their day, and they were universally regarded as heretics by the men of Afghan society. To solve the problem, the order began initiating women into their ranks. These male initiates believed that if they could initiate and convert the women, they could thereby weaponize the women to subvert the values of the men and thereby convert them too. The men of this order understood that men will often undermine themselves and capitulate to a woman's urging where they otherwise normally would not. The fraternity used this strategy and it was successful. They were able to coax the men into embracing radical doctrines. Here's another interesting piece of obscure history. There's an ancient strategy that was once used by Roman slave owners. Whenever a new group of slaves would arrive, the slavers would make a point to identify the obvious leader from the group, and once they identified him, they would delete him in front of the entire group, usually in a brutal fashion. Sometimes they would bash his skull in. They would get everybody good and traumatized, and later they would pull the women off to the side and would tell them, "It's up to you to keep your men in line, and if you don't, we're going to do the same thing to all of you." At first, the women were reluctant to conspire against their husbands, their sons, and their friends, but they still complied, and they believed that they were keeping their community safe by doing so. But after a few generations, the women actually began to enjoy oppressing and conspiring against their men, and they no longer needed to be pressured or even asked to do so. These women would manipulate their men, and they were pleased to undermine any rebellion efforts. They would gather intel on men who did plan on rebelling and would relay this information to the masters. What the UN are doing today on a global scale is very similar, and their central aim is to prop women up as the new gatekeepers of society so that all societies will be easier to control and so that women can establish the new norms of society, norms that are in alignment with the values proposed in the Sustainable Development Goals. Men and women need each other now probably more than they ever have, and if we don't have each other, we don't have a society anymore. But with that in mind, I've got some bad news for everybody. The wheels on this thing are turning, regardless of how you feel about it, and there's countless women who have been effectively weaponized against men, against the patriarchal family unit, and against the norms that define Western society. There's countless women who have already internalized the values proposed by the global elites. That's just the grim reality of it, and it's a reality we now have to contend with. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Mark Passio. He has quite a few insightful videos on YouTube that I recommend. I don't endorse most of what he believes in, but he made a very important point in one of his videos. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, when the elites of a society endeavor to play two groups of people off against each other for personal gain, it only takes one side to participate in the conflict. When that happens, the war is on. At that point, the targeted side has two options. Option number one, they can desperately flail their arms and beg the aggressor to stop, hoping that the aggressors come to their senses, while in the meantime sustaining damages inflicted by the aggressors. Or option two, they can defend themselves. If the targeted side does not make any effort to defend themselves, they're going to inevitably sustain losses and damages because the war is on. The aggressors have been weaponized to wage a war against them. The aggressors believe they're doing a righteous deed, and they're not going to cease fire on their own. It's not a convenient fact, but it is a fact, and for as long as a majority of women are choosing to walk in lockstep with the agenda to prop them up as the new gatekeepers, the wheels on this thing will continue to turn. That's all I really got for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. God bless you. God keep you. Till next time.